Hello, welcome back to another episode of Vinyl Show and Tell. How are we all? Hope we're all doing okay. Buying and spinning plenty of vinyl, I hope. So, just a weekend spins video. So, weekend just gone. It was a nice and quiet one. No days out, no social outings, no gigs or anything like that. So, Friday and Saturday afternoon and evening were spent just going through the collection and spinning plenty of discs. So, I'm just going to show you what I spun and just a few backstories as well. So let's crack straight on. So, first album is by a band, early 70s band called Third World War. Second album, aptly titled Third World War 2. They only did two. The first one is just self-titled. I've always maintained here in the UK that punk definitely existed in some form before 1976 and 1977. I know there is definitely the argument in the US, bands like the Stooges, MC5, things like that, later on the New York Dolls kind of paved the way for punk. But there were definitely certain bands that had that kind of attitude, and with Third World War you've got a kind of heavy hard rock, kind of rock and roll sensibility, but there really is kind of a political message in their lyrics. It's very, very working class all the way through. I mean, a lot of this stuff I'm surprised was allowed at the time, what they were actually singing about. But yeah, there we go. They were not your typical progressive rock band singing about, fantasy stuff and some of the other things that kind of come up that get slated sometimes. But anyway, this is a brilliant record. I'd certainly say it's a bit more polished than their first album, which is very raw. It's very, very punky. This one's got a few session musicians on it, but it's still got the same attitude. So if you like hard rock, you'll like this, and I think any sort of punk, any kind of fan of punk would also like this one. This is actually a French pressing. In the UK it came out on Track Records, which is owned by the management of The Who. But this is a French pressing and it came out on Vertigo for whatever reason. It's on the Spaceship label. Sadly it was a bit late to be issued on the Swell labels, which would have been good, but there we are. So yeah, it is a good one. That or the first album by Third World War. Most excellent. Second, we have a band which I know I've talked about and really bigged up before. This is the Method Actors. Now this is an album called Luxury, but here in the UK we got a free EP with it. So there's two discs. The EP is called Luxury Plus. I've talked about the Method Actors before. In my mind they are one of the greatest post-punk outfits ever. They were from Athens in Georgia in the US. They started as just a duo, one guy playing bass and guitars and singing and a drummer. On this one they've expanded to a four-piece, so you've got a separate guitarist and bassist, the drummer still remains, and they've got a saxophonist. Their earlier albums are very, very raw, quite sort of raucous sounding, really excellent. If you like post-punk, absolutely brilliant. This one is ever so slightly more polished, but it's still very raw. It's not polished to a standard a regular kind of mid-80s sound where sounds were getting too polished. They still very much retain that kind of post-punk sensibility. Absolutely brilliant band. And what's great about it, despite not seeing these in the world too much, they are very, very easy and cheap to get hold of. If you do look on Discogs, their albums are under £10, or in the US under $10. I can't recommend them enough. I mean, if you do happen to see these in the wild, definitely pick them up. But if not, they are well worth a look in from Discogs or possibly eBay. So there we are, the Method Actors. Brilliant stuff. Okay, here's a very good one. It's a reissue. This is by a German band called My Solid Ground. It's their self-titled album. Now I believe this is their only record, although there is an album of outtakes. I can't remember what it's called, but I haven't got it, but this is really their sort of main release at the time and one and only. Originals of this on the Bellafon label are probably worth upwards of £500. I reckon they're probably actually going into the thousands now. So if you want a chance on a copy, good luck to you. But this is an official reissue. This is still on Bellafon. It's got a lovely matte finish gatefold sleeve, and the record is a lovely turquoise there. I don't mind my coloured vinyl. If you look at my last video, I talk about coloured vinyl. If you want to check that out, little plug there for you. This is a great record. It's very much in the krautrock vein. I think one thing the Germans did in the early 70s is they kept one foot in the psychedelia camp. I think UK bands tended to stray away from the psychedelic sounds of the late 60s into the more progressive rock, but when it comes to the German bands, they kind of, you know, they kept their psychedelia, they embraced it. First track on this is called Dirty Yellow Mist, and it's 13 minutes long. It takes up most of side one, and it sounds very much like late 60s Pink Floyd, kind of 68, 69. It reminds me, if you know the track Careful with That Axe Eugene by Pink Floyd, it kind of reminds me of that. Very spaced out, really good. It's got a real kind of ethereal keyboard organ sound through it. It's excellent. The rest of the tracks are kind of variable. There's kind of like a sort of garagey, a dirty garagey hard rock sound on the rest of the first side. Almost sounds, you know, it could be like by the MC5 or something like that. And then they branch out into sort of other psychedelic territories. The best track on here is the opener on side 2. It's called The Executioner. It is an outstanding track. It is here on YouTube, so I really urge you to check it out. The Executioner by My Solid Ground is absolutely a killer psychedelic track. It is the best on the album, but in my view the whole album is brilliant, and I highly recommend it. As I say, it has been, this is a reissue, and it has, I think it's been reissued on CD and by various labels, so definitely worth hunting out if you can't find the original. Okay, next up, I think I've shown this record before. I think I showed this one when I first bought it, but I haven't played it. It's second album by The Shirts, and it's called Streetlight Shine. This is a UK first press on Harvest. So they were late 70s label mates with The Saints and Wire, but certainly in my view not as popular as either of those bands. Here you've got a New York based band, and I think they had residencies in CBGB's, but for some reason they just never quite got the reputation that all of those other bands got. Bands like Blondie, Television, Talking Heads, all of those which are regularly talked about and very popular. This lot just didn't break into the same league, but I think they are as good as they're like power pop, lovely female vocals, just really great put together songs, very varied, and it is a real shame that they're kind of overlooked. I've read certain reviews that state that they're what you would call the poor man's Blondie. I can kind of see where people are coming from with this, but to me it's a little bit unfair because they've got a real great sound of their own. Again, what's great about this band is their albums are so easy to find. I have seen these in the wild a fair bit. I say this is their second album. Their first self-titled album I've also seen out and about. And on Discogs, this doesn't, in the statistics, it sells for £5 or less. So if you fancy taking a punt on a cheap record, then I can't recommend this enough. It is really excellent, and cheap as chips and plentiful out there. And this is across the board. This is here in the UK, in the US. They're all out there. So great recommended. The Shirts there, Streetlight Shine. Okay, so next up we've got something from the 90s. Here's a band I don't know if many people know about this one. It's a second album by a band called Salad. Now, excuse the really garish cover because this is a great record and a great band. Back in the mid-90s, when this lot started recording, I actually went to see them live at a place called the Wedgwood Rooms, which is still open down here in Portsmouth. And they were really, really good. Female-fronted band. I think they were, you could certainly lump them in with the Britpop tag, even though, I don't know, what is Britpop really? It's just a series of bands that were around in the mid-90s. It's a very much a sort of media-driven kind of coin phase, isn't it? But they never, once again, like so many of these bands, they never really quite got the success or the recognition of other bands and their peers. Certainly sort of nowhere near the likes of Blur, who used to have Salad as a support. But this is an excellent record. Again, it's not dissimilar to the Shirts. It's a real kind of great power pop record with really well written and performed tunes, wonderful female vocals. And this particular album, the second album, which is called Ice Cream, is really difficult to find now. I have seen one in the wild before since I got this one, which was many years ago. But since then, I've never ever seen another copy. Never seen it. And prices on Discogs seem to be sort of going up quite a bit. I don't think, particularly on record, this sold very much. I mean, it's from 1997, and by the late 90s, vinyl was as on the decline as it could have been since it first sort of, you know, since it first started getting, you know, popular within popular music. But this is an absolutely wonderful album. I remember when I went to see them live at the Wedgwood Rooms with several friends, one of which may be watching now. We actually met the band afterwards, and they were so nice. We had just a chat with them, and they were really, really approachable and pleasant, which always, you know, always makes for good. I mean, they weren't superstars at the time; they're still not. But yeah, always brings back a good memory. And I didn't buy any of their albums until about 5 years later, when I was actually sort of getting all, you know, several Britpop bands' albums before they started really going up in value. As I say, this is an absolutely wonderful album. So Ice Cream by Salad, their first album as well, is also very good. So if you get an opportunity, please check them out. Okay, next up, back to the early 70s. It's a fantastic record, this one's called Shape of the Rain. And it's on RCA Records, their subsidiary, progressive subsidiary called Neon, which didn't have a huge amount of releases, certainly not as many as, say, Vertigo and the likes. I'll show you the labels for this one because it's really nice. There we are, Neon label, RCA, very, very nice design. So despite its label mate releases, which are very progressive, this is more of like a jangle pop record really. It sounds, the songs are very short, it's not got a lot of, you know, extended instrumental passages like its peers. It reminds me a lot of, say, if you know Fleetwood Mac's very early 70s period, the kind of what you call the wilderness years, that featured Danny Kirwan as a kind of main man and Bob Welch. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that. Maybe a hint of Wishbone Ash in it. There's twin guitar playing. Maybe a little bit of Big Star as well. Get me referencing Big Star, thinking I know all about them. It's a really, really lovely record. It's sadly the only one they did. Really well recorded. Unfortunately, well, whichever way you look at it, it's not cheap now, this one. If you want to get hold of original, it's not that cheap. I can't recall if it's been reissued. It probably has. There's certainly at the very least a CD reissue. If not, I'm sure it's here on YouTube. But as I say, it's called Shape of the Rain. The album itself is called Riley, Wood and Waggett, which are the surnames of the band members. I don't know why they decided to sort of do that. And the sleeve here is a beautiful, I don't know how much you can see that. It's this beautiful sepia Dickensian scene. One of the band members is petting a dog, and the owner of the dog appears to be a very angry Ebenezer. If you look on the inside of the gatefold, the band have been clearly shooed away, and there's Ebenezer going into his house. Only in 1971 would you get that. Absolutely fantastic. Brilliant record. Okay. Right, here's one I'm sure many of you will know about. Okay, there we are. Genesis Foxtrot. So this one here, lovely first pressing. I'll just show this one off. Red inner, textured sleeve. The original Charisma label with the B&C credits and the Porky Prime cut in the run out. If you're in the know, then you know. This is a lovely first pressing. I won't go too much into the record. I'm sure many of you know this one. I'm on a bit of a Genesis kick at the moment because I went to see a tribute act the weekend before called The Musical Box. It's probably the leading Genesis tribute act in the world, really. They only really focus on the Gabriel years. I've never ever seen them before, but they came down to the Guildhall here in Portsmouth after a 3-year wait. I actually bought the tickets in February 2020, and then you know what hit, and that that massively delayed things for ages. But they eventually came down and they played the double album called The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which is one of my favourite albums of all time, and it was absolutely mesmerisingly good. I couldn't believe how note for note perfect they played this entire record and recreated the stage setup of what Genesis would have done in the mid-70s. Mind was blown. Bear in mind I went there on my own. I was sitting there on my own, probably air drumming a lot, hollering and whooping a lot and being quite a nuisance despite being with no one else and probably having very little beer beforehand. Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant, and it's put me on a little bit of a Genesis kick, so I thought I'd give that one a spin. I'm very glad I did. So yeah, very enjoyable record. Sounds great, that one. First pressing. Finally, we've got this. So let's just pull this one out. Now, pronunciation problems as usual. This is a band called Menage. Is it Menage? Menage? If you want, correct me in the comments. If you can help with the pronunciation, please let me know. The album, equally I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, is Le Porcher or Le Porchard. You can see it there. So, this is an unusual record. I'll tell you how I got hold of it. A couple of years ago, this was during COVID again, my wife and myself visited our local refuse centre. In the UK, you may know it as the dump or the tip. We were just taking some old dining room chairs there. I bought some new dining room chairs, so the old ones got dismantled and we took them to the dump to get rid of them. So threw the chairs where they needed to go, and I decided to visit their little shop which they have. So that these places, they always have little shops with good salvaged items. They're like thrift stores, charity shops, what have you. And they had a large selection of records, so I was looking through, and it was all your usual stuff. It was Dusty Mantovani, Carpenters, Andy Williams, just, you know, landfill. It should have been in the tip, utter rubbish. But I pulled this out and I was like, that looks interesting. I initially thought it was a classical record, but then I noticed it was on Capitol. So I turned it round and I'm like, oh, hello. They look the part, don't they? Men with long hair, some with beards. Track number 1, 19 minutes. Oh, never heard of it. Never ever heard of it. But it looked interesting. So pulled the record out to check it. Lo and behold, it's a white label test pressing. I couldn't believe that either. And it looked unplayed. It was quite dirty. It's a bit mouldy, dusty, but that all cleaned off. So, took it to, found a member of staff, and they said, oh yeah, £1 for that. You'll have to go and see the man on the gate to take payment. There is a card reader there. Didn't have any cash at the time. And the chap on the front gate I showed him it and said, yeah, like to pay by card, and he had a bit of a strop saying he couldn't be bothered to get the card reader out. Just take it. I can have it for nothing. Owe him next time I'm back, and I haven't been back there since, to be honest with you. I might try and remember to take £1 next time. But anyway, took it home, and it is an obscure record. There's not many copies on Discogs, but they are a Canadian band, a French region Canadian band from Quebec. And it's a really interesting prog record. It's from 1975. Side 1 is kind of has loads of strings, orchestrated, more symphonic prog, whereas side 2 is much more of a jazz rock fusion vein. Mostly instrumental. There is a little smattering of vocals. It's sung in French. I can't understand the lyrics naturally, but the language, the sound of the French language, it just seems to fit the music really well, actually. So there we go. But I've always been a bit intrigued by this, because this isn't a well-known record. I mean, there are not many regular stock copies on Capitol on Discogs at all. It doesn't go for a fortune. But what was a white label test pressing doing there? From where I got it, how did it end up there? I don't understand it. It's very, very strange. And not only that, the sleeve to this it's a standard single sleeve. It's actually a proof sleeve. So you normally get tabs here that would be glued together and then form your single sleeve, which would be closed here, and as you know. But yeah, I couldn't really understand this one I got. I actually had to look up online what was going on, and yeah, so it's like a test sleeve. Yeah, very unusual, very interesting, and recommended. So if you do come across this one, go for it. I think they have done more albums, but they're more prevalent in the USA and Canada, to be honest with you. So that's all from me. Sorry, waffling on a bit, but yeah, I like to give a bit of background on these records. So yeah, I'll be back with more videos soon. I've got a few ideas in the pipeline of what to do. I think I might like to do some reviews on individual albums, if I'm honest with you. There are several albums I've got that just don't get the recognition they deserve. So I think I'm going to get that in the pipeline. Hopefully do some more finds videos, although sort of out and about buying's just taking a bit of a backseat lately. But we'll get there, we'll get back to it. So as usual, thank you very much for watching, and take care. See you soon.